Hey, what's up guys? It is Slick or Slick Muff here back again with another video. And this one going to be doing a type of video that I haven't really done that much on this channel. We're actually be going through a comic book. So this is Birds of Prey issue 8 from the 1990s, actually 1999. So this was by Chuck Dixon, who's one of the most iconic Bat family writers at the time. In the late 90s, early 2000s, Chuck Dixon was the main one writing Nightwing. He was writing Birds of Prey. He never wrote Batgirl because Batgirl was actually Cassandra Cain at the time in the early 2000s, and he did not write that. He did write Robin, however, and he writes Bane now. So anyway, he's a very iconic Bat family writer, a very interesting character. He's one of the only conservative writers in comics in terms of like his political leanings. He said that he's always preferred Marvel to DC, but yet he's an iconic DC writer, and all of his like Marvel books weren't that popular or successful. So yeah, he's a really interesting character in comics. But anyway, okay, so we're going to be going over Birds of Prey issue 8. And this is Dick Grayson and Barbara Gordon's first date. I use quotation marks, and you will see why. So, at the beginning of this issue, we have Black Canary and Nightwing, and she poses the idea of maybe Babs and Dick Grayson being more than friends. And he says, that's a good question. After our last get-together, I'm not sure. Which is not usually a great way to end a date, being unsure if you are anything more than that. So, I really enjoyed the art in this book. So here Nightwing talks about how he is basically flying over Bloodhaven because the traffic is really bad, and into Gotham as well. So he's going to meet Barbara Gordon in this moment. You will soon find out. So he arrives here, he changes clothes, and he says here, she knows both of us. I only hope she made it down there. Gotham to Bloodhaven was a fun commute then. And he comes in, he says, am I late? And Barbara Gordon says, I just gave myself some extra time getting here. So being sarcastic and witty as she always is. Just had the coffee and it's awful. They have roof access, so he's describing how he arrived to this so-called date, but she says that it's not a date. She says, this is just a friend's thing, right? And he says, it's not a date, Babs. So he instantly friend zones himself, kind of. Not exactly, and you'll see later. Okay, so their date is first dinner and shitty coffee, and then they're going to the circus. And not just any circus. This is the circus that Dick Grayson used to work at, and that his parents died in this very building. So a big theme of this comic book is sort of forgiving the past. You'll see that later, and you can see that Barbara Gordon is not actually fearful of the clowns in this issue, which is somewhat surprising. You think that she would sort of have a PTSD kind of reaction to seeing clowns, given that she is in the wheelchair. The incident with the Killing Joke has already happened at this point in continuity, but you can see she's not really fearful of the clowns. You can see here she's being very coy and kind of playful with him in giving her reaction to the circus. Then we can see that Barbara Gordon's talking about the circus. She says, circuses are supposed to be quaint, goofy and quaint, right? Of course, clowns aren't exactly my favorite, as she says, and he says, why didn't I think of that? I'm so stupid. Gotcha. You're so easy, Grayson. So once again, she's not actually traumatized by the past, really. She's very much so using it as a way to mess with him, and she's always being playful and kind of one step ahead in that sense. I'm so over that. Ooh, tiger. So once again, she is so over it that she can't even finish a sentence about it. So she really wants to leave the past behind, and that's definitely a theme in this book, but also just throughout this entire run of the Birds of Prey in the late 90s that ran into 2003, which is a very iconic run I would highly recommend. So she's actually somewhat offended by the fact that he is so defensive about not wanting to offend her, tiptoeing around her, kind of being like politically correct in a way. She's not very fond of this. And she actually calls him out on this. Besides what's with treats me to the circus line, you own this operation, right? Hey, I'm giving up an admission here. So he's basically saying that he doesn't really own the circus. And he says that evidently the circus doesn't really make him that much money. Especially because he doesn't know to nice him. And then, of course, we run into the guy that does actually own the circus, Mr. Halley. Um, like he doesn't own the whole place. Harry Halley of the Halley Brothers Traveling Circus, Barbara Gordon, Charmed. How's the show running? So they meet the guy that actually owns the circus, basically. I'm not exactly sure how that pertains to the rest of the issue, but that's okay. Does it hurt to come back here? Meaning, this is where your parents died. So you can see Barbara Gordon is very much of the type of person that's very forward. She's not the one that would like tiptoe around the past, try not to offend anybody. She's just sort of attacking this head on and asking her about it. Of course, we get the flashback of her parents dying. Maybe it should. I don't know. Maybe I'm at peace with my demons too. Their killer met with ultimate justice. So, of course, the way in which his parents died was actually a sort of like an inside job, basically, to kill them. So, in other words, it wasn't just an accident. And their killer was given life in jail. So, basically, once again, it's all about sort of moving on from the past and reconciling their inner demons. When tragedy strikes, they say you need closure. What a crock. I wanted revenge. Swear you won't tell anybody. Part of me still does. I remember that night, every time I answered the door. And you can see her after the events of the Killing Joke. Her dad reading the newspaper, iconically in the Killing Joke sort of outfit that she was wearing at the time. So, then they have this sort of intimate moment. They're talking about the past. Barbara Gordon says, a lot of the time, it's like you bad guys want me to hold on to the past because you can't get over it. I understand. So here she's kind of throwing shade at Batman, obviously. But the woman I'm talking to isn't Batgirl or Oracle. It's Barbara Gordon, and I have a question for Barbara. What's the one thing you can't do now that you wish you could? Basically, her response is flying over the city, flying in the air. It's kind of like a freeing moment for her, she says. And, of course, Dick Grayson, being Dick Grayson, offers and says, well, that is what we are going to do. So, of course, cut, and here is the moment on the cover. Her legs are taped for whatever reason, seemingly because she has no movement in them, so therefore they need to be taped together, otherwise they'll sort of, like, flail around. So she has them taped together here. And, this is obviously quite scary. She doesn't seem to be scared because she's Barbara Gordon, but anybody else would be in this moment, especially because she is handicapped, and it could, worsen in terms of her condition or what have you. If she were to fall, and he actually leaves her all on her own. She has no movement in her legs, so she can't really, propel forward or backward, but nonetheless, he leaves her on her own, and she's not exactly scared. She says, if you're trying to scare me, you're not doing a very good job of this, and simple flying transfer. You're kidding me. And she's very hesitant about this, but as you'll see, ultimately she accepts this. She is a little nervous about this. You talk too much, Grayson, being very coy and snippy once again. Looks like she's about to fall. Of course, she doesn't. He catches her. She's having a great time, even if she was a little bit scared before that moment. And no kiss that we know of. It's possible that it happened, but nonetheless, they have a very intimate moment. So who knows if the kiss ever happened? But in any case, she says, "I'll never forget tonight, Dick. Me either. But it doesn't have to be an isolated thing, does it?" So of course he's sort of asking, is there going to be a next date? And we will see. I don't follow. So she's sort of playing dumb. He says, yes, you do. I'd like to keep seeing one another. I can't, and you know why. So 100 feet off the ground, you'll place your life in my hands. But you're afraid of a date. It's more than a date with us. It always has been. You know why I don't have handles on my chair, Grayson. I don't like to be pushed. Babs, thanks again for tonight. And that's the end. So basically, she doesn't really even offer the conversation. She immediately puts an end to it by saying, I don't have handles on my chair because I don't like to be pushed. So basically this insinuating that, she doesn't want to be pressured about it anymore. And also, she doesn't like to be pushed in the sense that in a relationship, perhaps he could push her around or dictate the trajectory of her life in some way, perhaps. And she's saying that she doesn't want this. She wants to be completely independent. He says that she's very proud of her because of how she's sort of progressed, but he sort of critiques her for being perhaps too independent in this moment. Then they chat here, and basically you see the return of the work relationship, but the date thing, um, never comes about again. So basically, the insinuation is that at this point there is no further dating between them. So this is a amazing issue. It's one of my favorite single issue comics of all time. That's why I'm giving you a tour of it. Uh, Chuck Dixon writes Barbara Gordon very much so in a very, very like hyper independent, very coy, playful kind of way. Whereas it's not necessarily my favorite interpretations of Barbara Gordon. I much prefer Gail Simone, for instance, where she's a little bit more like caring, compassionate, kind of like lighter in terms of like taking her in all at once. Dick Grayson, of course, is typical Dick Grayson. I would say Chuck Dixon is probably the best Dick Grayson writer ever in terms of comics. And I really like this issue because it's a one shot. It's very much so its own story, but also it does talk about reconciling with the past and how Barbara Gordon accepts the past. She talks about how she does have moments of wanting revenge on the Joker, but she doesn't enact upon those, and she channels her energy, she channels her resentment of the past, her anger, in other ways, and that is being Oracle and looking towards the future, preventing crime in the future, helping people in the future, as opposed to seeking revenge in the past. You can see the ways in which she's different from Batman in the sense that she does not want to dwell upon the past, of course. Bruce Wayne is very much so fueled by it, even decades after the death of his parents, when, his parents died when he was, 9 years old, roughly. And he's 40 years old and still being Batman and fueled very much so by those events, whereas Barbara Gordon doesn't want to be in that position. But anyway, guys, hope you'll have enjoyed this run-through of this comic. Let me know what you thought of Birds of Prey issue 8 from 1999. I would say you can buy this comic, but it is around $60 to $100 in good condition. Of course, I know this because I looked into getting it. But yes, it's very expensive. So yes, I did use Read Comic Online, which is like a pirate source. But shh, don't tell anybody. Okay, hope you guys have enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. My name is Slickmoth. I'll see you guys in the next video.